Hi, I'm Joe Puckett. Thanks for joining me. Let's talk about a warning from Christopher Wray of the FBI. If this stuff isn't concerning you, I'm worried about you because continues to go on and on. We've been talking about this stuff since last year, but it continues to grow and continues to become true. If you look at everything that's going on, both the predictions as well as even the universities, different college campuses, we're seeing protests that are borderline going into domestic terrorism. They're tearing these places up and causing all kinds of issues. So let's talk about a little bit of this stuff here. FBI Director Christopher Wray issues another warning. He did this just a couple weeks ago, and I'm quoting from a MSNBC interview where he reiterated comments he's made before, but he continues to get more and more concerned. You know, he says that the threat from terrorism since October 7th is as high as it has been in some time, especially from the lone actors, or what we might call sometimes the lone wolf. Small groups radicalized at home by the war. And since he brought that up, he started this discussion with the news media a couple weeks ago. And so this last round of warnings, and we're in level orange and this kind of stuff. And since he started that, we're now seeing some of it coming true. We're seeing groups now that are beginning to organize and protest, and they're becoming somewhat violent as I see it. So this stuff's coming more true than what was even happening at the time. Small groups radicalized at home by the war. And it's not really small groups. We're talking about major college campuses. We're talking about hundreds of people in some cases, hundreds of kids, I'm not a fool to think that all of those people doing the protests are kids from the college. The reality is there's probably some paid folks in there, and there's some folks that are coming from other locations to do this protesting, but we're beginning to see these groups formed and radicalized. But Christopher Wray said, there are also elevated fears about a coordinated terror attack in a public place, a prospect that for the last decade has been seen by intelligence officials as extremely remote. So, it's getting worse. And if you're not seeing that, that's why I want to talk to you about this, because it is getting worse, and we need to get more prepared for our different functions and our different events and activities for not only the lone wolf, who we've always talked about, bigger chances of the lone wolf, but also radical groups that are beginning to form as well. And we're seeing those right before our eyes, right on TV. We're increasing, Christopher Wray continues from that interview, we're increasingly concerned about the potential for some kind of coordinated attack here in the homeland, which may be not that different from what you saw against the concert hall in Russia. And I'm adding in there, he didn't quote this, but there's 140 plus people killed. And this is being linked to ISIS-K. And he's quoting that, and there's other sources, including ISIS-K, that are admitting it. And I want to add to the discussion that ISIS-K was also responsible for a bombing in Iran, which killed 95 people. So, we're talking about, if you look at the links, and I don't consider myself an expert, but I'm reading this kind of stuff. And stick with me, because this is going into an important place. This is all starting to come together, and it's believable if you look at the different pieces. This ISIS-K group has been they're strengthening. Taliban strengthening this ISIS-K because of the holes in Afghanistan. And I'm not saying that from a political standpoint. I'm saying that from fact, that there is plenty of room in Afghanistan now for these groups to get together, form a better alliance, and become stronger and train and begin to send people out. And we've been through that before. Many years ago, we've been through that kind of stuff before. So and they're beginning to form up again. And that's concerning to me. But there's a bigger picture that I hope you'll stick with me for that. Bigger picture, bigger issue going on here. And so, April 30th, just a couple days ago, Washington Post article. I just want to be accurate in where I'm getting my information. Director Wray is quoted in there as saying, as I look back over my career in law enforcement, I'm hard pressed to come up with a time when I've seen so many different threats, all elevated, all at the same time. He has rising concerns about things. They've gone to a whole new level as far as he is saying. And so this so far, important information. He's saying things are looking bad. If you look at all his different interviews, red lights are going off for him, but he's now saying just in the last few days, things are going to a whole new level. And we're seeing the radical stuff going on in our campuses and different groups. That causes sympathy. That causes people to the one-off lone wolves to become sympathetic and or the groups to become sympathetic. And so, if you look at in that article, he's goes on to say the pool of potential ISIS-K recruits or lone wolf actors in the United States is impossible to calculate. Now, this is from the article, not necessarily from Christopher Wray. But a senior official at the Department of Homeland Security told me, the writer of this article, April 30th article in the Washington Post, Department of Homeland Security told me, the writer, that over the past 12 months, as many as 50 Central Asian migrants a day have entered the United States this past year, which means that could be more than 10,000 folks from those regions, which can include the ISIS-K folks. And, there's discussion that certainly we assume that many of them are just looking for the asylum and they're asylum seekers, but are all 10,000 of those people just asylum seekers, or some of them entering this country with other ideas in mind, with thinking of perpetrating violence against us as lone wolves or as groups? And how much easier are we making it for them to organize, to come over here and organize? And there's so many ways for them to get into this country without being detected as being from Afghanistan or Pakistan. All they've got to do is go to certain countries that they can get into, and then that connects them. They can connect flights into South America and then make their way across the jungle and make their way up across the southern border. And so it really just takes them a few weeks to do that. But they can do those flights. They can go to a different country where they can legally get into, where that country can then legally obtain flights to South America, Nicaragua, other countries like that. And then, so then we add to that the pro-Palestinian protests. And I don't understand if a lot of these young people even understand what they're protesting. I don't think they do. But it's going on in several campuses right now as I record this, and it's getting heated. I know even right in our own state of Oregon, one of the groups has completely destroyed university's admin building and library. From what I'm told, they have just destroyed it. So, and then there's all kinds of other issues going on. So, and this is widespread. This should be getting scary, concerning to you if you're looking at it at all, because what's next? If they're kicked out of the universities, is our churches going to be another protest point? I mean, we got to start looking at that kind of stuff. Or could we be a focus point just based on the fact that these folks are becoming sympathetic to the groups and they're trying to get attention by other means? So now they move to churches. So something that I think we have to think about, it's getting to the point where it is, It is a scary situation. It's going on all over. I didn't list all the campuses and universities because I don't know if I have enough slides for that. And you don't want to spend the time just going through all the details. But I mean, there's like 3 in Florida and 2 in Texas and multiple campuses in California and just really all New York, just all over the nation. These protests are popping up, and these things are domestic terrorism. I mean, they're going into destroying things and resisting arrest and all of these kind of things, where I don't think it takes much more to escalate that. So it just takes somebody that becomes a little bit more radicalized than the rest of the group, or somebody that's watching this on the news and becomes sympathetic to them and decides they're going to do something to get even more attention. That's why we've got to be paying attention to this stuff. So how do we improve our security ops? That's what I want to talk to you about. I'm now focused on churches. We talked about the news part. I could go into more and more detail, but what we can see is there is a serious avenue in multiple fronts, whether it's people coming from other countries across the border and organizing, radicalizing here, or whether it's our own people, a lone wolf or a group that gets radicalized that Director Wray was talking about. I mean, there are probably at least 5 or 6 methods right now where we can see people rise up to be more violent that could rise up against us as well as churches. So we need to talk about it a little bit. So how can we improve our security ops? Here's just a few suggestions. I really am leaving this with you. I'm giving you lots of opinions. I'm giving you some facts here. But here's the things that you can do to improve our security ops or the security of our churches. Add people to the team, or maybe you just have an extra person on shift or for a service, however you do that, and position them strategically. If you can only add 1 or 2 people, however that is, you recruit more people, or you're just saying to your team, hey, I got to work you a little bit more right now. Hire armed security or off-duty law enforcement. Some of you have that ability. We don't really have that ability to hire off-duty in my region on the West Coast. There's not as much of that goes on as for you folks in the Midwest and the East Coast especially. Think of some of the components here. And this is where I've said before that paying attention to what's going on in other countries and overseas is important, because we need to learn what they're doing. We need to pay attention to their tactics of going in and shooting up the place, or blowing it up, or burning it, or however that works, or going in with knives and attacking, because these methods are going to come with them over here. If it's not a homegrown lone wolf or a homegrown group that gets radicalized, they're going to bring those tactics with them from over there. So we need to be paying attention to that. Brush up on how to handle protesters. We've got a podcast, we've got a show from a while back. Look that up, about talking about handling protesters, or do some other research. We, of course, got to talk about the active shooter, violent intruder. What are you going to do? Whether you're armed or you're unarmed, what are you going to do in that situation? The lone wolf or the radical group. You got to start talking about those scenarios and going over in your mind, what are you going to do? And when you go over that stuff in your mind, then that helps you to think of, okay, maybe I need this, maybe I need that. Maybe we need to lock these doors for right now during these difficult times and just have the front doors open, or maybe we need to, at a certain time, we lock everything down and we post people there anyway. And so just what are we going to do in these situations? What are we going to do to look for bombs? What are we going to do, and start looking for those, patrolling for those kind of things. And, walking around looking for suspicious packages, suspicious boxes, those kind of things. And begin to practice of what you should look for. What kind of things should we be looking for? How about where your fire extinguishers are? Review where those are located, where and how to use them. Maybe look up a video on YouTube on how to use that fire extinguisher. And maybe if you can get a chance to get one and practice a little bit with your team or ask your local fire department to practice with you so that you're ready for small fires to break out, something that you can do with those. And, and think about, what can I do if these kind of things happen? What am I going to do if I do find a suspicious box? What am I going to do if somebody does start a fire during our service at the church? What am I going to do to take care of those things? Because we want to look at these kind of things. Using the use of knives is common in other countries for these terrorists. Use of guns, of course, use of explosive devices, and in fuel, other things. What are they doing? What do we need to be paying attention to? That's the important stuff. And shift your focus to being as efficient as possible. And that's the entrance and the parking lots. If you can get that entrance down to 1 or to minimal, that also means you've got additional team members possibly. So, look at this as this is a different time right now. It's a radical time. So where normally we have 3 doors open, let's go down to 1, or let's go down to 2. That gives us some additional people to be walking around outside of the entrances and paying attention to the parking lots as well. So, and I didn't mention yet, but I want to encourage you, we do have training at churchsecurityacademy.org. You can go over there, get some training. If you need some training in some of the basic areas, some certs, those kind of things, I would encourage you to go over there and check out what they have for you. And I'm just challenging you with this stuff. I just want to get you thinking, especially if you're not thinking about the possibility of some crazy stuff starting to happen in our near future. I want to encourage you to start thinking about it and start trying to plan for it, whatever that scale is for you. If you're in a small church and you're just by yourself, then get yourself educated on what you should do in these different types of situations. Educate yourself on what kind of things happen, in Afghanistan when they're terrorists and they're doing their violence. What do they do over there? How do they conduct their violence? And begin to think about that. Don't let it overwhelm you. There's still a good chance it's not going to happen to you, but we got to be prepared for it. And I always say, there's 380,000 registered churches in the U.S., 7,000 plus in Canada, and we can go on to other countries. There's a lot of churches, a lot of registered churches. So the chances of it coming to your actual church, unless you're a New York City church or an LA City church, the chances are slimmer that they're actually going to come to your church, because there's so many churches across our nations and out there around the world. But we've got to be prepared just in case it comes to our church, because violence and these surprising things do come to small rural churches sometimes. And in our history, they have happened. So I'm just encouraging you, not discouraging you, but encouraging you to look at what's going on and get more prepared for that. Please like and subscribe. We want to connect with you, and take a look at this next video.